But Randy is kicking things off with a bold prediction. And Randy, thank you as always for your super chat, buddy. We really appreciate it. But Randy's comment, Ryan, and I want to get your take on it, is I think the best defensive lineman will be Rylie Mills. If he stays healthy, he will lead the team in sacks. What say you, Ryan Robertson? I think there's two different things to that. Sure. One part I definitely don't agree with. The other part I could actually see, depending on how the season plays out. But let you respond to it, Ryan.
Well, so Randy, it's a little bit of what I talked about earlier, right? It's, you know who Isaiah Foskey is, you know who Jason Amalola is. That's where like your attention, if you're opposing offense, is going to be early on. So I can subscribe to the second part where I think that if you are double teaming Isaiah Foskey consistently across the majority of the season, if you have Jason Adamalola as a guy that has your attention, I think Rylie Mills could fight for that sack title on the team. I think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that he can get to that point. I would push back to Brian's point. I think he was kind of setting this up. I mean, Isaiah Foskey is a potential first-round pick next year, right? Like, I mean, the kid is 6'5", 260 with vines for arms and a potential stud even on the next level. And we already know what he is, right? Like, I mean, last year, he's still kind of raw as a player, and he still had 11 sacks or 10 sacks or whatever he had, right? Like, he is a potentially dominant football player. So I would push back to the best defensive lineman on the team, maybe in a couple years, but in this season, I would say it's Isaiah Foskey. But I do subscribe to the fact that Rylie Mills may have a lot of one-on-one opportunities, so maybe he does lead the team in sacks. I don't think that's outlandish.
Agree. I think it's him leading the team in sacks. I don't think that makes him his best player. I'll say this: if we are talking about this in the season in a real manner, this will be the second best defensive line in college football this year, behind Clemson. Because if Rylie, well, that or it's going to be a really disappointing season. Because there's two ways that could happen. One is Rylie really raises his level of play, and he's a dominant player. Two is Isaiah doesn't play well, and Rylie outplays him. I don't think that's going to be the case. So if we're having this conversation and it's not injury related, then that's going to be a great sign for Notre Dame, because we're not even talking about Jason Adamiola here. I mean, I think Riley's battle right now is, are you the third best defensive lineman on the defensive line? All right, not number, or are you even second, not number one? If we're having a conversation about him being number one, Randy, to your point, that's going to be a great sign for Notre Dame, most likely. But I do want to pump the brakes a little bit on this, though, because I think Rylie has a chance to really break out this year, but he does need to show it. That's going to be the thing for me, is he needs to show that he can consistently be that guy, and that's the part right now, Ryan, that he has not quite proven yet. But I'm confident that he's going to be a really good player for or a good player for Notre Dame this year. What I don't know is, can he be a really good player for Notre Dame this year? Like, he's going to, at the very least, he's going to provide you similar run defense that Myron brought last year, just by size alone, and potentially could bring even more pass rushing prowess to the table. Like, to me, he combines a little bit just on raw ability. And this is, just hear me out here, because I'm just talking about potential, not what I'm predicting. He has a lot of Khalid Kareem in his game as a run defender, potential-wise, as a big end. Big size. Riley's about 20 pounds bigger, but he's not as long as Khalid was. So those things, he's long, but not as long. Khalid had insane length. I mean, I think was the longest defensive lineman in his draft class, first or second. He might have been. There was one guy that had like 35. He was second.
He almost had like 36-inch arms. Like, it was insane.
It was nuts.
Yeah.
But Khalid was a great run defender, in my opinion. And he was a clutch pass rusher, but he wasn't a consistent pass rushing force. He only had 4.5 sacks his last year. But you could probably remember all 4.5 of them, because they all came in big moments. That's what I loved about Khalid. So I thought Adetokunbo Ogundeji was a good run defender, but not a great run defender his last year. But he was a good pass rusher. He was a really impactful pass rusher in 2020. And so I thought he brought, didn't he lead the team in sacks in 2020 with like 7?
Sure.
I thought he did.
I thought he had like 8. I could be wrong.
I'm pretty sure he led the team in sacks. I'm actually going to go look this up real quick. He did. He was credited with 7, and then Isaiah Foskey was second with 4.5. And so, I could see Rylie being similar to that, and maybe 8. I'd be a little surprised if Rylie got to like 10. That would be quite a leap.
That
Like,
would be a
even if
lot.
you're, because when I say, well, he'll get some sacks because of Isaiah, I'm counting that towards me thinking he could get to 7 or 8. Like, that's counting like Isaiah just crushing the edge and then the guy scrambles and runs into Rylie. Like, I'm already counting that into the 7 or 8 that I expect him to get next year. Now, if he's beyond that, that means he had a heck of a year as a pass rusher. And so I could see it, but he's got a long way to go to get there from what we've seen of him and what that would be. He's got a lot to prove. I'm optimistic we're going to at least see flashes of that. I think that's more likely, Ryan, is there might be a game or two where like, wow, Rylie was your best defensive lineman today.
Mm-hmm.
But to see it the whole year, that's asking a lot of a guy that's really just cracking the starting lineup for the first time, in my opinion.
And also playing a position full time for the first time as well. Like,
Right.
I mean, I know he played a little big end last year, but for the most part, he was an interior defense lineman. I'll say this: he may be your most impactful defensive lineman this year from an inside outside perspective.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to be able to line up all over the place, which is going to be huge for this defense, I think. Right? Like, I think there's going to be a lot of, and again, this is just my speculation, but I think there's going to be a lot of third downs where you're just like, Rylie Mills, go inside in 3-tech, dude, and just destroy this offensive guard
Right.
one-on-one, because you're going to slide your protection still to Isaiah Foskey because he's the dude, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that from a inside-outside perspective, he's your most well-rounded moving chess piece.
Yeah. It gets the pass. Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
I'm actually really looking forward to some potential alignments this year on third down or nickels where you've got him and Jason both inside. Like,
silly.
because in that you can still use one of them as almost an end if you go to a 3-man front and want to drop your 4th defensive lineman into coverage, whether it be Justin Adamiola or Isaiah,
Yeah. You saw that last year. I posted the clip on Twitter of when Jason slanted outside against the right tackle against USC and just long-armed him into the quarterback. I'm like, yeah, he can do that stuff too, man.
Right.
Jason's another kid that he can line up all over the place
Right.
and be incredibly impactful.
And that's why I like the potential for having him and Rylie inside together in some nickels with Isaiah and Justin Adamiola on the outside. That is where you could really have a dynamic group of pass rushers this year. And you can drop both of the edges can drop, Justin and Isaiah. You can put either Jason or Rylie on the edge because like you could do things where you could put Rylie on the edge and put Jason or Isaiah or Justin inside on a 3rd and 9 and let them rush on the guard. I mean, you'll do that. You'll see that from time to time.
Sure.
And it's not, he's playing defensive tackle. No, he's not. He's just getting an ISO pass rush because of the protection. They know the protection. It's going to be a man blocking protection, and they're just going to get the ISO pass rush there against the guard. That's what Notre Dame did to Clemson. They in that because it wasn't the first sack that they had. I think was Dalen had the first sack, and it wasn't like a 2nd and 20. It was a 2nd and I think 9 or 10. And but they knew that Clemson was in a passing down because they'd been throwing the whole game, and they knew that Clemson's scheme was going to keep their guards and ISOs. They weren't going to be getting help. They were going to be in ISOs. So they moved Dalen inside and put him over the guard, knowing he was going to get a one-on-one pass rush. So it wasn't that he was playing 3 technique because he was standing up, but that's how they got that pass rush. So you're going to see some stuff like that in obvious passing downs.
Can you imagine too if they had some alignments on passing downs where they had Isaiah Foskey, Rylie Mills, and Alexander Ahrensberger in there? All that length there, man, is just absurd to think about. It's a lot of fun to think about.